Shemot chapter 9. In the last chapter, we discussed the idea that the plagues were a result of natural imbalance meant to show God's mastery over nature. As the plagues continue in chapter 9, here are 3 further ideas as to why God chose these specific 12 plagues. Interpretation number 1. Measure for measure, middah keneged middah. One approach views the plagues as middah keneged middah, punishment in kind for Egypt's oppression of Israel. Each plague mirrors an Egyptian act of cruelty. The plague of blood. Pharaoh decreed that Israelite male infants be drowned in the Nile. The river thus became an instrument of death, now turns into blood, a source of death for Egypt. Frogs. Egyptians forced Israelites to capture reptiles and amphibians for food or ritual purposes. The plague overwhelms them with frogs, which later rot and stink, symbolizing the corruption of their actions. Lice. Denial of basic hygiene to the Israelites resulted in a plague that makes cleanliness impossible for Egyptians. Arov. Wild animals in this interpretation. Egyptians sent Israelites to hunt dangerous animals without protection. Now, wild beasts roam freely in Egyptian homes. Pestilence and livestock, dever. Egyptians exploited Israelite labor to tend their flocks far from their families. Now, their own herds perish. Boils, or skin disease, shrin. Egyptians forced Israelites to bathe and groom them. Now their own skin erupts in painful sores. Hail, barad. Israelites were compelled to work in fields regardless of weather. Now hail destroys Egyptian crops and property. Locusts. Egyptians relied on Israelite labor for agriculture. Now locusts consume what remains of their harvest. Darkness. Israelites were made to work day and night. Now Egypt is plunged into a darkness so thick it immobilizes them. And death of the firstborn comes full circle. Egypt's firstborn die as a punishment for Pharaoh's decree against the Israelites' infants. This framework underscores divine justice. The punishment reflects the crime. Interpretation number 2. The plagues as a military siege. Another interpretation likens the plagues to stages of an ancient siege, portraying God as the ultimate general dismantling Egypt's defenses. Blood, cutting off water supply, first step in weakening a city. Frogs, psychological warfare. Noise and chaos demoralize an enemy. Lice, arrows or projectiles, small but persistent attacks biting at the enemy. Wild animals, sending mercenaries or raiders to terrorize the inhabitants. Pestilence, capturing livestock, removing food sources and sources of labor. Boils, wounding soldiers, physical harm to fighting capacity. Hail, catapult bombardment, stones and fire raining down on a city. Locusts, destroying remaining food stores, starvation tactics. Darkness, cutting off oil or power, plunging a city into confusion and darkness without electricity, or, in the modern sense, sending some sort of cyber attack to weaken the technological advances of the enemy. And finally, death of the firstborn, executing leaders, final blow to morale and governance. This analogy conveys that the plagues were not random, but a systemic dismantling of Egypt's strength. Third interpretation, an assault of Egyptian gods. In the ancient world, natural power was tied to divine power. When one nation conquered another, it was seen as the victor's gods defeating the loser's gods. The Torah explicitly frames the plagues as a theological confrontation. I will execute judgment against all the gods of Egypt, for I am Hashem. We'll see ahead in chapter 12. Each plague undermines a deity central to Egyptian religion. Blood, Nile. The Nile was sacred, associated with Hapi, the god of the river and fertility. Turning it to blood desecrates Egypt's life source and humiliates Hapi. Also, as we've seen in an earlier interpretation, as Hapi was the goddess of fertility, there's an irony here of attacking her first, because that's where the babies were being thrown by the Egyptians early on. Frogs. Frogs were linked to Heket, goddess of fertility and childbirth, often depicted as a frog. The overabundance of frogs mocks her domain and turns her blessing into a curse. Lice. Dust of the earth produced lice, challenging Geb, god of the earth. His realm became a source of torment. Wild animals. Many Egyptian gods had animal forms: Anubis, a jackal; Horus, a falcon; Sobek, a crocodile. The plague of beasts turned these revered creatures into instruments of chaos. Pestilence and livestock. Cattle was sacred to Hathor, goddess of love and motherhood, often depicted as a cow. Their death signals her impotence. Boils. Healing was under the domain of Imhotep, deified as a god of medicine. The plague mocks Egyptians' medical prowess. Hail. Storms and sky were associated with Nut, the sky goddess, and Shu, the air god. Their inability to prevent fiery hail shows their defeat. Locusts. Agriculture under Osiris, god of vegetation and fertility. Locusts consuming crops nullify his power. Darkness. Ra, the sun god, was Egypt's supreme deity. Darkness for 3 days is a direct assault on Ra's sovereignty. Death of the firstborn. Pharaoh himself was considered divine, the son of Ra. Striking the firstborn, including Pharaoh's heir, destroys the living embodiment of Egyptian divinity. This interpretation is reinforced in Exodus 9:14, when God declares before the plague of hail, "For this time I will send all my plagues upon your heart, upon your servant, and upon your people, for you will know that there is none like me on all the earth." Here, the purpose is explicit. The plague was not mere punishment. They are a theological statement that no Egyptian god can rival the God of Israel on earth. The plagues were multi-layered, acts of justice, strategic dismantling of power, and a theological revolution. They shattered Egypt's economy, morale, and pantheon of gods, demonstrating that redemption is not only physical liberation, but also a spiritual transformation. Through these plagues, the Torah teaches that history is not random. Every event can carry profound meaning and purpose.